Adventures with Dice. Welcome back to Adventures with Dice. I'm Rob, and I'm your host for these videos. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the Dungeons and Dragons Rules Cyclopedia. This was a product that was put out in 1991 that consolidated all the best stuff from the BECMID series of box sets that Frank Mincer did, and put it all into one book, very cleaned up, more organized. The design of the book is not like Mincer's box sets in the sense that his box sets really stepped you through. They took your hand and held your hand and stepped you through learning what an RPG is and how to play it, which today for most of us doesn't seem like that big a deal. Like, most of us are very familiar with those concepts. But in 1983, when the box set started coming out, the red box released, it was kind of a big deal because the game Dungeons and Dragons had only been out almost 9 years, I think, at that point, and had several rule cleanups. The Holmes edition, the Mulvey Cook, and then the Mincer edition, all since the original pamphlet box set. And I like the Mincer edition best. It is the one I started with. BX is fine. But the problem with the Mincer edition boxes is you had so many books that at a certain point you were just digging through books trying to find certain rules to cover certain situations, because it started you out with a solo adventure and then another solo adventure, and each one was stepping up your knowledge of how to play. And in the early days of D&D, a lot of us were trying to figure this game out. We'd never played a game like this before. There was no game like this before. So it was a learning process of trying to figure out what all this meant. Excuse me. And there were concepts that we probably got wrong. Well, I know a lot of us got wrong. Several of us have talked about it on videos, myself included, how we got things wrong, but we just played and had fun, and that's all that really mattered at the end of the day. But like I said in my first Back to Basics video, I reprinted the red box and the blue box, and I started looking at them just for nostalgia's sake. Just, had a cup of joe, just reading, just enjoying it, going back to yesteryear. And at a certain point, it just occurred to me, it was like, well, I've spent several years chasing this old school feel with these retro clones. And there's nothing wrong with the retro clones, don't get me wrong. But I'm like, I have access to this stuff. Why not just play the original game? So I started with the red box and started building on this idea of playing the original game. This month is my birthday, and my son got me the Rule Cyclopedia for my birthday, because I really wanted it, because it, unlike the Mincer box sets, it does not teach you how to play by holding your hand and walking you through the game. It assumes that you have some knowledge of D&D going into it, and it consolidates and organizes all the rules into a very neat and concise fashion, which, if you're going to be running the game, I find very helpful. It's much easier than digging through, well, was this rule in the red box, the blue box, the other blue box, the black box, so I find it helpful to have everything in one. I'm not going to go into too much of this versus the retro clones in this video. I have a video where I'm going to do a versus video between this and Basic Fantasy, just to kind of show the differences between what was put out here. And I think one of the most amazing things about what was put out here was this was done And it's, to my knowledge, the only time that TSR, or WotC for that matter, has put out the game, and it's a complete game in one book. Normally there's the player's handbook and the DMG and the monster manual, and I think it retails it's like $140, $150 to get all three of those books in the current edition. Some of the older editions are cheaper, some of them are more expensive. It just depends on where you buy them from. Now these from the BECMID series, this was basic D&D, and it was different than AD&D. There are differences between them, but you can still use them together. There's even a compatibility conversion guide in this to switch to AD&D second edition at the back. So that's helpful as well. And sorry about the noise. My wife has a cat. Ugh. Anyway. So, anyway, it's really good, and I will look at the differences between it and some of the modern retro clones in another video. But in this video, I really wanted to take the time to just talk about what this is, what's in it, and why I love this book so much. So, first of all, buying an original print of this off of eBay that's not a reprint, from 1991, is, unless you just happen to stumble across a good deal, is pretty expensive, in my opinion. I've seen some of them going for $200, and I'm just like, I don't like any D&D enough to pay $200 for the rules. So, I did eventually look into the reprints, and that's what my son ended up getting me. This is a reprint of the book from 1991. And I gotta say, I used to have that book because I bought it in 91, and I think an ex-wife might have happened to it somewhere along the way. But what I remember, and I could be wrong because I don't have an original in front of me. I wish I did. But I remember the original being a little thinner than this, and I don't think that had to do with the content, because all the content is here. I think it had to do with the paperweight that was used on the original, because this is much thicker, much better paperweight in this, so the book is a little bit thicker, I believe. Now that is me going off of my memory for that one. However, I will say that I have gotten PDF scans of old D&D books, like my Red Box and stuff, off of drive-through in the past, and most of them are good, decent to good, but you can really look at them and tell that this is a scan. With this, I will say the quality is so good. It's, other than being obviously a reprint because of the age, the book itself, the paperweight is a lot heavier. The pages are clear, crisp. There's no bleed through. So we can look at that a little bit. Let's open her up here. So the first thing you have is your table of contents, and it goes over everything that's in the book. Your character creation section. I've tabbed my book out just to make it easier to grab stuff and go on the fly. But it goes over the basic concepts of the game, how the game is played. Not really a lot of examples. It just kind of jumps right into creating a character. Now, let's talk about characters in BECMID&D, because that's what this is. So you have the cleric, right? And you have the fighter, and you have the thief, and you have a magic user too. How did I miss that? I guess that's this table. Yeah, no, that's the thief. Somehow I missed the magic user. Yeah, there we go, magic user. I did not open to the right page. Oh, there we go. Magic user, thief. And then we have, after that, the demi-human classes. You have the dwarf, the elf, and the halfling. Then we also have the optional druid class that's in this book, and the mystic. So let's just take a moment to discuss this, because a lot of modern D&D players do not grasp the concept of, wait, you're playing a dwarf but you don't have a class, or you're playing an elf but you don't have your race is your class. That's so weird. In the early days, that's what it was. It wasn't so much a class and a race. The dwarf was a character. You were playing a character. If you were playing a fighter, you were playing a human fighter, because that's what the character was. You see this in other games of the time, most notably HeroQuest, which was piggybacking on the success of D&D to do a board game version. And you have the Barbarian, which by the artwork looks like a human dude, a Conan type character. You have the wizard, you have the elf, and you have the dwarf. And it's not a dwarf fighter or dwarf thief or anything, it's just the dwarf. And it's because back in the day you played a character. Now, that initial statement tends to put off a lot of newer players. They are like, well, I don't have the options to really customize my character. And that, I understand that concept, but it's not completely accurate. There are a lot of optional things that you can customize your characters out with. For instance, you have an optional skill system in here, which is pretty neat the way it works. I'll go over it in more detail later, but the one thing I don't like about later editions of D&D, especially 3rd edition up, is the fact that you had this concept of class skills, or you got these skills and that's all you ever got. But you didn't have that restriction in BECMID. You had a list of suggested skills that are in here, but at the same time, you also have the verbiage in the book telling you, if you and your party want to create new skills to add to the game, then feel free to do so. So, but you can freely pick and choose your skills, and you get, at character creation, you get 4 skills, and you get 1 extra skill per intelligence bonus point. So if you got a +2 bonus from intelligence, then you start with 6 skills. But you can pick your skills from anywhere you want. So if you're playing a halfling character and you want him to be more thief-like, you could pick more thief-like skills. And like I said, I'll go over later how they work. But you pick the skills to make the character you want. You want to play a ranger, you create a fighter. And depending on the kind of ranger you want to play, he could be a melee ranger, he could be a ranged ranger. A range ranger. That's weird. Anyway, but you could do that and then go through and pick skills like, survival and tracking and things like that, and you have a ranger. So you actually have a really diverse way of creating whatever characters you want to. You just have to, it's not spelled out for you, and you're not told, well, if you want to play this character, these are the only skills you can have. No, you can pick the skills you want to make the character you want. Now, that being said, what a lot of people also didn't understand about early D&D is your race versus class. And you had, if you were a cleric, a fighter, a magic user, or a thief, you were automatically human. Now, could the demi-humans take skills to be like those classes? They can. But they also have built-in abilities that the human classes, the regular 4 classes, don't have. Like the elves and the dwarves have like dark vision, and You know, the elves can't be paralyzed by ghouls and things like that. These are bonuses that they have, but they also have different sets of saves and things like that. Like, for instance, a dwarf is literally a fighter, but with better abilities and better saves than a human fighter. If I were playing in a game of this and I wanted to play a fighter type character, mechanically I can't see myself playing anything but a dwarf, because they just have better saves and they come with built-in dark vision and stuff like that. The elf is a combination of wizard or magic user and fighter. You know, they're a magic user, but they can use weapons like a fighter. So, I mean, that's pretty beneficial right there. So anyway, you can do a lot of that. Now, they also introduced the Mystic class, which is kind of the BECMI answer to the monk / ninja type character. Depending on how you go with it, there's a, excuse me, early in the morning. There's an acrobatics option you can take for your monk, and it does incur a XP penalty, but it allows you to do a lot of acrobatic stuff and jumping, fighting, amazing things, like, you know, kind of like you would imagine a ninja to do. But you could also go the other route and not take that penalty and create the more, I guess, European style monk. They're your friar type monks fighting with a quarterstaff or whatever. So, and I got to tell you, because I run this game on Tuesday nights for my group, which consists of my friend Jay, my wife Tina, and our 3 kids, who range from 13 to 22. And my 22-year-old is, well, he didn't make it very far with his halfling. He got killed in the second session we were playing. He got killed. And he decided to come back and try the monk or the mystic. And neither one of us had really sat and paid a lot of attention to what you could do with the mystic until me and him sat down that night and started looking at it. And goodness, this thing is broken. Like, it's not broken, but he has some amazing abilities. Like at level 2, his hand attacks, his fist attacks count as silver weapons. Like, he can punch werewolves and hurt them. At level 5, his attacks count as a +1 weapon, like for overcoming defenses of a monster and stuff like that. And his AC, he doesn't wear armor, his AC gets better as he goes up naturally. His number of attacks gets better as he goes up, and he gets faster. The Mystic is just an amazing character. It's a really cool character, and I was impressed by it. I've never really wanted to play a character like that, but I would definitely give it a shot in this. So I guess it's all in what you take from it. I know there are guys who are like hardcore BX, which I like the BX books. They're cool. I think you get a lot more from BECMI than you do from just BX, but it's so interchangeable that you could use any of this stuff with BX. I also, AD&D and AD&D 2nd Edition, while not 100% compatible, you have to do some converting, are still D&D, and they start expanding out on the character options a lot more than what you have here. But you have a lot of character options, and a lot of your character options in modern day D&D, and I'm not talking about 5th edition furries. I'm talking about, your modern day monk and paladin and so on and so forth. You can play those. You can play a lot of that essentially in this, but then you also, if you play later editions, you have classes that are dedicated specifically to that. Now, in this, one of the things you can do is, as a fighter, you can, after you hit name level is level 9, because that's when things really start to ramp up for you. You start gaining lands and building keeps and dominions and things like that. But after hitting name level, the fighter has options that they can take where they can become a Avenger, a Knight, or a Paladin. And I kind of like that concept because I've never liked the fact that a first level character just starts out, I'm a Paladin. You know, it's just weird to me. It's like you didn't really earn it, but that's just my opinion. I like the fact that you kind of have to earn it to get to be a Paladin in this game. Your cleric at 9th level can choose to, neutral cleric can choose to become a druid. The mystic you can play from level 1 on up, but it kind of gives you optional, almost like your modern day prestige classes as you level up. Now, that's just the stuff that's in here. If you get into the gazetteer books that were made in conjunction with BECMID to expand on the knowledge of the known world and hollow world, and the known world becoming Mystara, a lot of those books have new character options in it. Like the Dwarves of Rockholm has the character option for playing a dwarven cleric, and so on and so forth. So those books, as you're going through them, they start expanding out your options and things you can do with it as well. If you're playing in just your homebrew world, you can obviously use any of that, but there's really enough here that you don't have to. It's also fairly easy to look at how some of these classes could be combined in certain ways and create your own class. I've been toying with the idea of like a witch hunter type class to add into this, because I like to add witch hunter classes into stuff. but that's a completely different video. So anyway, you have a pretty robust character section of things you can do, and then we go into spells, and it has lots of spells. It has all your clerical spells, druid spells, regular arcane magic spells, and this video is getting kind of long, so I'm gonna go through it kind of quick here. But we have a pretty intense equipment section, which is not just your standard fare of equipment. You do have that, but you have your armor, your equipment, your adventuring gear, your barding for animals. It also has sailing vehicles, animal cost, land transportation cost, siege weapons and how much they cost. My character's actually used a battering ram in this week's game. Then you have the weapon mastery rules, which needs a video all on its own and can be one of the more complex parts of this game. But first of all, weapon mastery is optional. It is not a rule, and I'm not using it in my current game because I'm introducing new, younger players to the D&D that I grew up with. So I'm not using weapon mastery. You don't have to use it. It kind of works like skills in the fact that you buy ranks in a weapon instead of a skill with it. But like I said, it needs its own video. But weapon mastery is a cool option that lets you kind of flesh out what fighters can do. So then we have the optional skill system. The skill system, you can see this list here this is the skills that they have listed, and this is by no means an exhaustive list because they tell you in here, add whatever skills you want to it. Like I said, remember those skill points I said you got in the beginning. So the way it works, real quick and dirty, is let's say I am playing a character who has a +2 intelligence bonus, all right, which is pretty good. So I have my 4 base skills or skill points that I start out with, and then I have 2 for my intelligence. So I have a total of 6. So what I could do is you have the skills are broken into groups, or if you add skills, you would put them in the appropriate groups: strength skills, intelligence skills, wisdom skills, charisma, so on and so forth. I could go through and say, okay, my character is going to pick 6 skills, and I would pick 6 of these off of here to build the character the way I want them to be. Now, whatever attribute that skill is linked to, let's say the skill I pick is linked to a attribute I have that's 13. If I have a skill linked to that attribute, then when I go to use that skill, I just roll a d20 and I want to get a 13 or less because I have a 13 in that attribute. And if I do, that's a success. If I don't, it's a failure. Now, how do you make them better? So for each skill point that you dump into the same skill, or each skill you buy twice or more, basically, every time after the first time you buy the skill, it increases that skill by 1. So let's look at tracking. Let's say I have tracking, right? And I have an intelligence of +2 bonus. Or even if I don't have a bonus, like I have no bonus. Let's say I have the 4 basic skills, right? So I want to be really good at tracking. I could take tracking initially, right? So I have the skill, and let's say I have that 13, right? In intelligence. So I could say, all right, I got tracking, bought it once. I now I try to get a 13 or less on a d20 to get the skill off. But I want to be really good at that, and I don't care about any other skills. So I'm going to take my other 3 skill points and go tracking, and that's going to add +3 to it when I do tracking. So now my tracking is a 16, and I would just make a note of the 16 next to where it says tracking. I wouldn't have any other skills, but I would have gotten really good at tracking. So you can do that with any skill, and you don't have to put them all into one skill. If you had 6 skills, you could buy 3 skills and then bump each one of them by 1 if you wanted to. It's very customizable. It really lets you do it build your character the way you want to. So that's just a quick and dirty overview. We have movement, the movement rates, how encumbering affects that. It talks about everything: traveling, land travel, becoming lost, food in the wild, water travel. There's a big section on that. Then we get into combat. Yeah, here's the other thing about old school that just blows people away, and that's THAC0. To hit armor class 0. Your armor class in this game, the lower it is, the better. And that throws modern players off because they're used to it being higher means better. In this game, lower means better. But and I will admit that in the 80s playing this, it was hard to wrap my head around this concept then, but that was also because I never played a game like this before that. Like these were just new mechanical concepts that I did not have. Now going back and looking at it, I'm like, oh wow, that was really easy. I don't know why it was so complicated, but that's because I have learned so much about mechanics for game design and gameplay over the years that it now just seems really simplistic. And I'll probably do a video on it. It's not going to be long because I assure you, THAC0 is easy. It is so easy to do. And I mean, I introduced it to my table with 4 players here, 3 of which are my kids. None of them have ever played an old school D&D game using descending armor class. And I explained it once, showed them how to look at their combat chart on the sheet, and I have not had to explain it again. They figured it out and just ran with it. So it's all about perspective, I think. But I will do a video if y'all want me to explaining THAC0. It's super easy. Next, we get into the section on experience points. How you get experience. You do get it for defeating monsters. Now, notice I said defeating monsters. That doesn't necessarily mean killing monsters. If you can find a way to steal that monster's treasure or bypass that monster, I still give you the XP for it. You also get it for treasure. Like accumulating wealth was a big deal in old school D&D, and that's one way you get your XP. And one of the beautiful things about this version of the game is it gives you something to do with it. A lot of retro clones only touch on this, and a lot of modern games don't include it at all. And if you become a character who amasses a bunch of wealth, you really don't have anything to do with it unless your GM starts making up stuff for you to do with it. In this, you go from 0 to hero by level 9, basically, and you start accumulating lands and building keeps and building towers and hiring militia and armies and stuff, and there's mass combat rules, and you really get into the larger realm of role-playing, like political intrigue and things like that. Because after 10 levels, you're probably tired of scrounging around in dungeons for coins. You're ready for some bigger stories at that point, and this game gives you that. It gives you that in spades. You have a huge section on NPCs and how they work, retainers and all that stuff. You have the monster section, which I actually printed this out. I showed it in another video, and I did the monster section and made myself a monster manual, basically, that I have separate from this. You have treasure, which the treasure charts are so detailed in this. They are some of the best treasure charts I have seen in any of these games. And I love the randomness of them, the way they're set up. These would be really good. They're good for the game itself, but they would be really good if you were playing this solo as well. Which I may do at some point on the channel. I may do some solo videos. I've got a lot of other solo projects that I want to do right now, so I'm enjoying just running this for my group. But you have a treasure section, and you go from the treasure section to campaigning and how campaigns work in your game, because your game is getting bigger at that point. You have a whole section on the planes of existence, which is really a neat read. Section on variant rules. You have, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but you have the mass combat and domain building and all of that in there too. But then we also have in this book the D&D game world, and this is the known world, right, that is from the Gazetteer series. Now, obviously, this doesn't have everything from all 14 Gazetteers in it, but it gives you a snapshot of it, so you could play in this world even if you didn't have the Gazetteers. The Empires of Illyrium, Principalities of Galantry are discussed. You have the maps of the known world, and then you have information on Alfheim, Rockholm, the Five Shires, Theodas, and then you have, the maps that go along with it, all of the known world. Then the Hollow World, it goes into that quite a bit too. So you actually have 2 campaign settings in here. And then you have the appendix. This is the game conversions that I was talking about for AD&D, for switching over to that. Then you have character cards for GM reference, character sheet, spell book sheet, adventure record sheet, a very small hex map, and then a really detailed index back here. So it covers a lot, right? And in that it covers, most games, and even modern games, don't cover all this in one book the way this does. And I believe at the time of filming, this is like $30 on DriveThruRPG. Not counting shipping, because your shipping is going to vary depending on what you do with that. But that's the print on demand. Like, you can get the PDF for $10. So if you like just doing PDFs, super cheap to get the PDF. But I like physical copies, so I love having being able to get my hands on this book. Number one, it's just a fantastic piece of my gaming history, all wrapped up into one, and we are having a blast with it. We actually had 2 games going. We had a Friday night game with somebody else, and it was starting to fall apart. Friday nights are weird because, they'll go good for a while, and then it's like people start, wanting to do things on Fridays or Saturdays, and it's just hard to get together. So we started this game on Tuesdays playing BECMID&D, and I had my son's character, who's a cleric, was Alina from the red box set was his sister, and he was out on a different adventure when he came back and found out she had been murdered by Bargle. And the story just kind of sprung from there. I used that initial story to springboard into my campaign that I'm playing with them, and they're all loving it. Like, they talk about the game throughout the week. Every day something is brought up about the game and they're discussing it, and that's a good sign. When that's happening amongst your players and you're not having to start all those conversations, that means they're thinking about it, they're enjoying it, and they want more. And my son told me yesterday, he was like, man, I'm just enjoying just dungeon diving, like just going in, trying to collect treasure and so on and so forth. And it's just, we're having a really good time with it. There has been no complaints. Some of the concepts for newer players were a little weird, like, racist class and stuff like that. But after the initial, okay, well, this is what I'm playing, and they got over it and made their characters, there's been no slowing down. They're having a blast playing this game. I'm having a blast running this game. So if you're interested in playing basic D&D, go to the Drive-Thru RPG, grab the PDF, or get a print copy like this. It is well worth the money. I am very, very pleased. As you can see through the flip through, there's no bleed through on the pages. It's high quality. It's a high quality reprint. I'm really, really pleased with this. And if you want to play old school, yes, you can get the PDFs of the red box, or all the BECMID stuff, really. But this organizes everything and puts it together for you. Now, obviously, this has been pointed out in plenty of videos. It doesn't go so much into the Immortals box set. There is a section on Immortals in here, but it's more flavor than anything else to kind of tell you how to use them in your campaign, because this version of D&D doesn't really focus so much on gods and theology and things like that as the Immortals, who were once, mortals who rose to an extremely high power. Also, this game goes from levels 1 to 36, so it's a very intensely huge game. But it didn't cover a lot of the Immortal stuff, but a lot of the Immortal stuff, they kind of got revamped in the Wrath of the Immortals box set, I believe. And to be honest, most of us never played games that got that high. So that's kind of neither here nor there. That's, if you want it, you could go look that up. But as a complete game, D&D has never been put out like this, to my knowledge, where you have this much information. You have all of the player information, all of the GM information, the monster manual, 2 campaign settings, conversion stuff, everything all in one book for $30. It's really a hard deal to beat if you like old school D&D. Now, if you don't like old school D&D, I'm not really sure why you clicked on this video, but if you want to play AD&D 2nd edition, I believe you can go get those books off of there too. If you want to play 3rd edition, they may have 3rd edition stuff. I don't know. I haven't looked. But you can kind of go back and play whatever edition you want if you don't like the current edition of D&D. So that's kind of what I wanted to do here, is just kind of do a flip through and just talk about how much I love this book and how cool the stuff in this book is. I will be back soon with a video comparing this to probably Basic Fantasy, which is one of the bigger retro clones out there. It has a huge following. It's a fantastic game. It was the first OSR game that I picked up, and I still treasure all my Basic Fantasy books, but I am going to do a comparison of what this book offers versus what their core book offers. So that's really all I got for now. If you are interested in the Rule Cyclopedia, or if you're interested in playing old school, or if you currently run an old school game, I'd love to hear about it. Put it down in the comments. If you have snarky, nasty comments, then they probably won't ever see the light of day. So that's just the way it'd be like that sometimes. Otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed the video. Come back and I'll have more available soon. You can always join the channel and become a member, and for $1 a month you get early access videos and whatever other stuff I tend to put up there. And until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.